Hi, this is Beth Billings from Around the Table Yarns, and today is the second class of the Petunia Pullover by Ainur I'm going to say it right, Berkimbayeva. So in today's class, we are working on some of the transitions between the sleeves and the body. And I just want to get everybody oriented on where we are. I'm going to switch on my camera. So I am making the size 8 of the children's um, version of this Petunia pullover. And I have been working, so it's a pullover. It starts in the middle of the back and you work out to here. And then you put these stitches on hold and then you start the sleeve with with like a tab, and then you rejoin and you knit the whole sleeve. So in the previous class, we worked on those transitions. And so now we're finishing the first sleeve. And what I want to show you is my sweater here. So here we go. Here is the middle of my back. Seems a little bit better. Okay. So here's the top of my sweater. There's the yoke with the correct shaping. And here's the initial waste yarn provisional cast on. And then I knit it across the width of the body. It's too close, isn't it? Only if I lift it up. Okay, there we go. So here's the top of the neck, the middle of the back going across. So after we finished doing all of these repeats, we put part of the back stitches onto a holder and we put these stitches. So we separated, there were two different holders, and we separated the side from the yoke stitches. Then we used another provisional cast on and we cast on these stitches and we did this tab. This is going to be under the arm. Then when we had done 2 stripes for my size, I rejoined the green yarn, and when I got to here, I continued knitting up and started to repeat the short row shaping that we were doing. So this is my whole sleeve. And now at the other side of the sleeve, I've put the yoke stitches on a holder again. So it's on a barber cord holder. And then I continued for another 2 stripes of the sleeve. So the yoke part of the sleeves are on holders, and this again is the tab that's going to go under the arm. So this is the coordinating the other side of this tab. So this is the whole sleeve. And the next instruction is you separate the yoke from the sleeve, the lower part of the sleeve, and you continue knitting just those lower stitches for 2 stripes for my size. And then what we're going to do is go back to the provisional cast on and put these back on the needle. And so that's actually what I'm doing right now. I'm using a circular needle. So the last stitches I worked are on my circular needle here. And I'm using the other half of that needle to pick up the stitches. So I want my needles when I'm done to be pointing in the same direction. So I took the yoke side of my needle and I started to go under the right sides of all the stitches in the first row. So you can see, let me get a little closer to that. You can see that what I'm doing here is I'm going under the right side. So if you look at this right here, this is a stitch between my fingers. It loops up and around. So it's kind of like a horseshoe. And I want to go under the right leg of all of these horseshoes. So as I'm going in, I want to go under the right leg of each horseshoe and then over the left leg, under the right leg. And this puts my needle into the stitch as though it were, it's like I'm putting it back onto the needle. And I can do this with the provisional stitches in place. So I started at the very edge. So if this was the very edge stitch, I put my needle under the right leg and then under the right leg of the next stitch. And that puts all the stitches on in the same mount, the Western mount. And I want to go all the way to the very end. Okay, now my stitches are back on. And I'm going to untie, I believe this was a crocheted cast on, so I'm hoping it just unzips. Not unzipping. Wonder if I just did the knitted cast on. I can't remember what I did. In 2 weeks. It's been a month. So that's the case. And you can just pick out these stitches. From the edge. Maybe I was demonstrating the other cast on. So I'm just going to get a double pointed needle and I'm going to pick out my stitches. And it's going to take a second. But you can see as I pick out my stitches that these stitches are right on the cable where I want them. And I used a smooth mercerized cotton for my waste yarn. So even if I do have to pick up each one individually, it doesn't take very long. And I like using a double pointed needle or the tip of another needle for this. And I find that as it gets longer and longer, unless I want to preserve my waste yarn, I can cut it out of my way. I don't know that I want to preserve it, but I'm judicious about cutting because I have cut my stitches before by being too hasty. So I do recommend not being too hasty. But taking your time, making sure all of your first row stitches are where they're supposed to be. Snip it up here. That's a little safer. pause the recording for you. So, all right, so we're getting to the end of the pickup, and we paused it there for a second, the video, so that you wouldn't have to watch me pick out every single stitch. For some reason, my fingers are very slow today. And all right, there's my provisional cast on out. So now, because I turned my needle in that direction, oops, right off the top of the screen, you can see, you can see that I have both needles pointing in the same direction and on the side that has my working yarn. So now I'm going to pick it up and turn it, and we're going to do, I'm going to untrap my yarn from the center. I always take time if my yarn gets tangled. I always take the time to untangle it. So like right now my yarn is coming from the wrong place and it's coming from the center and I don't want it there. So take a second and untangle if you get tangled. There's so many things coming off of this that it's really, I think it's really important to not let it go without some attention. There we go. Oh, more yarn. So here's my ends. Here's my 2 needles. And this is the one that I was using before. This is the one I just picked all the stitches out of. And this is the inside of my work. Double check the pattern. With the wrong sides of sleeve facing you and holding the spare needles and main needles parallel, use working yarn and other end of main needles to work a 3 needle bind. So I put mine onto the main needles, but that's okay. I just need to have a spare needle. The wrong side of the work facing me. In other words, right sides together. And my current working yarn is for me is the orange one. So I want to use a needle that is the same size or slightly bigger than the needles I'm on. So I have a bunch of needles here. I'm just going to grab one. And we're going to do the 3 needle bind off. So your needles are pointing to the right. You're working right to left. You should have the same number of stitches on because this is the same part of your sleeve. And what you're going to do is go into the first stitch as though to knit, go into the first stitch on the second needle as though to knit, hello, it's the green yarn, it's not the orange yarn. Okay, so then you go into the first stitch as though to knit, into the second stitch as though to knit, and then you come through both stitches. So I've gone through both of those stitches with this stitch, and you take them off. Then you go into the next stitches, wrap the yarn, come through both, and then I like to see them both come off and then you're going to bind off one stitch. Go in and through. I like to keep my ends of my needles very parallel, so I like to touch them with my finger and then push the yarn off. I like to make this a very loose bind off, so I'm pulling up extra as I do it. So I go in. You're just going to do that to the end of all of the sleeve stitches. And then your sleeve will be finished. This sleeve will be finished for the moment. So again, I'm doing this as loosely as I can. And you're on the, sorry, pulling up my yarn. So this is the 3 needle bind off. So what you can see with this bind off is that it's worked. It's very secure. And on the inside, it just doesn't even look like anything happened. It just looks like it was worked in the round. Sideways, worked in the round sideways. I really like 3 needle bind offs. But sometimes people like a sewn bind off, like on a shoulder seam, because it's firmer. But in places where you want to have as little seam as possible, where you want to, where you don't want to sew, a 3 needle bind off is a really nice alternative. Using short rows, you can create like tops of shoulders that match. Not in this sweater. Obviously, this sweater is knitted in a completely different direction. But I've done seaming of a front to a back of a sweater using the 3 needle bind off. Just keep going along. One from the front needle, one from the back needle. And every time you have 2 stitches on the right needle, you do a bind off. And I'm being extra loose with my bind offs because this is along the underside of my seam. I don't want it to be puckered or gathered. I want it to be nice and flowy. So see how nicely that is lying flat? And it doesn't have, it's not bulky feeling. So I'm going to continue to the end and then I'll come back. I'm just going to pause the recording. When you get to the last stitch, you work it just like the other ones. So now your needles are out. Pull that last stitch off and then leaving enough of a tail to weave in later, you're going to cut both yarns off of the sleeve. So I've got a bunch of tails on here that I'm going to weave in later or hide in my seam. And now I'm going to turn it back right side out. And there's my sleeve. So it's a very generous looking sleeve. And now I need to reattach. So I'll be working a piece. So now we're going to work a piece for the beginning of the front. And remember, these can be made blousey sort of at the end, or just be open sleeves. Cute. So cute. All right. So I have some stitches on hold right here, and I'm going to slip these back onto my main needles, which I just did something with. There. They were on the floor. Okay. So my working yarn, my working stitches still have the markers in place. I used a barber cord, so I'm just going to plant my needle tip into the barber cord and very gently push it through all of those stitches to the top. Right. Now, I goofed. These were the yoke stitches, and I need the side body stitches. So I'm going to put
I was wondering.
I know. Feel free to comment. So I just took these off the barber cord for no good reason. I mean, they're going to come off the barber cord in a second anyway, but not quite yet. All right. So these are my stitches that are waiting. I tied a little loop in my barber cord, so do that. All right. Like that doesn't make any sense at all. So the barber cord makes getting stitches on and off very simple. So now we have our stitches back on the needles. And we're going to do that same thing of working a little tab here before we rejoin. So it's the same thing that we did before, where we'll be adding stitches to the side of the body. So here's our sleeve. So what we're going to do is add a section to go across these stitches. So you can see these stitches are the underside of our sleeve. We need to add the same number of stitches across the bottom of the sleeve at the top of the body. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 stripes. And then when we're done with that, we'll be joining up again to the yoke. So that's going to take some doing. So it's the same kind of situation we had before when we joined up and did the sleeves. So I'm not going to show that this time. Just know that you are working on these body stitches, and it's going to be the same number of stitches. Let's see if I can show this here. So we're going to work these rows to match. And when we get to there, we'll be able to join these stitches will go across those stitches, and we'll have the front of our body. So for next time, let's complete to there. Because some of you I know aren't quite up to this point, but let's complete so we're ready to join our sleeve stitches, sorry, our yoke, our front of the body stitches at the side to the yoke stitches. And then we'll repeat getting to the other side of the body, and then repeat the sleeves, and then we'll eventually get to the back. So that's where we are. I know it's sort of a mystery, but it's not a bad mystery. And if you're using barber cord, don't forget to put a little knot in them so it doesn't slip off, because sometimes they do. All right. Any questions?
So that's page 5, front right body, where you're leaving off.
Are you doing you're doing an adult one?
Yes.
Let me look on my, because I'm doing a child size, so I'm on a
Oh.
different. No, you're fine. Let me just look at there. So at the top of page 5, where it says front right body, you're going to begin, and you'll work with, for whichever size you're doing. See how there's no, so in that section, I'm going to just show this section real quick.
Yeah, that's it.
This one, there are no short rows in this section. And
right.
That's because they're the ones that correspond to these sleeve stitches. So see how there's no short row shaping in here?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. You're going to work another set of stitches to match that will not have any short row shaping.
Okay.
When you get to the end of that, you'll be, if I were laying this across, this needle would be up here, and it would be ready to go onto that piece. So what you're doing is the side of the body.
Okay, got
it. Okay.
Okay.
It's the front right side of the body, or the part of the body of the sweater that's under the arm.
Right.
And then when we get done with that, we'll be able to rejoin at the yoke. And I'd like to show that, but there's no way that I'm going to get all of those stitches done tonight before that.
Right.
That would be what we do the next time.
Okay.
In March.
I should be ready because I would have almost made it. Almost.
And it's okay. We've got other things going on. So
yeah, I hear you.
Doing it together in March.
Got it.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you guys have a great month, and we'll see you next month as we get the side of the bodies and the yoke stitches rejoined.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Night.